Welcome to A State of Mind, the podcast that brings together psychology, neuroscience, psychedelics, meditation, teachings of Buddhism and other philosophies, and so much more in service of creating healing, health, growth, and the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I'm recording this here in my office in downtown Boulder, Colorado, where I work as a therapist, coach, meditation teacher, record this podcast, and I have other things coming out too. I've got some music coming out on SoundCloud. Check out the links below. And I'm excited to announce with you all that I'm launching a new integration group. It's going to be Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time on Zoom. And I wanted to create an offering that's more accessible for everyone who wants to be there. And this is a great way to join and get the support of a community, an online community, have my facilitation and help with the integration process. Integration is something I'm really passionate about. Many people in the field of psychedelic therapy consider it to be the most important part of psychedelic therapy, actually. And part of what integration is referring to here is better living through chemistry, which is a way we could understand using medicine and substances as approach to healing and growth and transformation. Better living through chemistry still requires better living, meaning we need to be making better choices. And any approach to healing and growth and what people are looking for in therapy and in different ceremonies and different contexts is a life of greater health, happiness, and that means making better choices. That means integrating the lessons and insights that we might learn during a peak experience or a spiritual experience or a psychedelic therapy session, integrating those insights into our daily life. So if you'd like to learn more, send me an email at astateofmindcounsel@gmail.com or check out my website, astateofmindcounseling.org. And now on to today's episode. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with Jon Kamin. Jon is the creator of Open Minds Expo. This is coming to Denver, November 23rd and 24th. And Open Minds Expo is the world's first consumer expo for psychedelic therapy. There's going to be a lot of great teachers, therapists, facilitators there, and it'll just be an incredible wealth of knowledge and information being shared, all kinds of different panels. There's different workshops you can do. There's a lot being offered. I will link to it below, but check out openmindsexpo.com. And I will be giving a talk on one of my favorite subjects, that of integration, at the Open Minds Expo this Saturday and Sunday, November 23rd and 24th at 11:30 a.m. So come on down, you can hear me speak, we could talk about integration. If you use the code Julian10 in getting your ticket, you can get a discount. The Open Minds Expo is a large, colorful, fun, psychedelic conference happening in Denver. I'm really looking forward to being a part of it, and you should definitely check it out if you're in the area. And it was really fascinating to hear Jon's story and how he got passionate about psychedelic therapy and the healing potentials there and all the work that he's been doing. So please use Julian10 for discount to Open Minds Expo and enjoy this conversation with Jon Kamin. So I am here today with Jon Kamin. Jon, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Hey, thanks, Julian. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And we connected through a conference you're organizing called Open Minds Expo, happening in Denver in, 3 weeks?
It's coming 2 weeks.
2 weeks, coming up soon.
Yeah.
And that, do you want to speak to that? Do you want to say what that's about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm super excited to meet you in person when we're there. So the Open Minds Expo is kind of a new concept, right? I mean, there really hasn't been anything quite like it before. The idea here is to educate the consumer. You know, if you're in this, this ecosystem, you're a practitioner of psychedelic therapy, there's MAPS and Wonderland and Remind, and there's so many conferences, PsyCon, which is in town just before us. Everybody goes to the conferences and they're always kind of the same, right? It's $500 tickets and, cocktails, and it's great for practitioners, right? We all get to sort of meet each other and, the industry, but no one ever really invites the consumer or tailors the content for the consumer. And I think it's a huge miss. It's something that we're trying to it's a big gap that we're trying to fill. The consumer doesn't really understand this world. Psychedelic therapy is super complicated. They don't really know where to go to ask their questions or how to engage or why it's expensive, and just this litany of sort of foundational questions that it's really hard to find answers to. So that's what the show's about.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it is a complicated, complex world with a lot of changing, moving parts. And that's great. I went to the MAPS conference, MAPS being the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Science. I went to their conference in Oakland in 2017, and it really changed my life. It altered the course of what I wanted to do professionally. It aligned with a lot of interests I have, but it was a moment in time where my eyes opened and I realized that this was a big movement that was going more mainstream, and that's become true. It's become more and more mainstream. More and more people are interested in it. And
Yeah. My
yeah,
first MAPS conference was in Denver last year. I've probably been to town 3 or 4 times. But I actually love Denver. I think it's an awesome place to live. But
yeah.
yeah, really eye-opening, right? I mean, just the scale of it, the engagement of people was just really, really fascinating. I met tons of great people last year.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. I think Colorado, especially the Denver Boulder Front Range area, is at the forefront of psychedelic legalization and making it more accessible, more usable. And of course, psychedelic therapy is a part of that, but it's not the whole picture. And one thing we can share, if people don't know, is there was a ballot initiative that passed last year approving the use of psilocybin, so psychedelic mushrooms for therapy. But part of that ballot measure was also approving facilitators who are not trained therapists to be able to use it. And so they're part of that movement to legalize that here in Colorado has been to not let psychedelic medicine just be in the control of the medical industry or the pharmaceutical industry or even my profession as a therapist, but to have this broader access for coaches, facilitators, as well as trained professionals, which I think is really
Yeah.
great. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, I mean it's interesting, coming from Toronto, Canada. That's where I'm born and raised and where we held the first Open Minds Expo back in June. Toronto's a quite a progressive place, but and obviously in the cannabis side, Canada sort of, led the world in recreational legalization. But like we're not decriminalized for psychedelics officially. There's stores, half a mile down the road, I could just walk right into a store right out on the street with a big sign that's selling mushrooms, and it's totally illegal. They could get shut down. They often do. They get fined, but we're a bit of a backwater for psychedelic therapy.
Huh.
There's a lot of stuff going on. It's still very underground. It's difficult to find people. It's all sort of word of mouth. And then you call into Denver and you start to get to know folks like yourself in the ecosystem, and it's like looking into the future. It's amazing. There's so many people participating, and the training programs are popping up all over the place, and people are talking about it. In fact, I almost feel like people have talked about it so much, and they're so used to this topic now. It's sort of become so normalized in the conversation. It's really interesting. Like for us, it's looking into the future.
That's cool to hear. Makes me
Yeah.
feel happy to live here, to get to plug in and be a part of it, and to do my part to shape that and be here at the forefront with everyone and be excited about it. And
Yeah.
there's also places to raise the flag of caution and maybe places we need to slow down. It's a complex, nuanced situation. That's fascinating
Yeah.
to me. Like Toronto, so you could be walking on the street. There's a store with a sign saying we're selling psilocybin mushrooms, and yet it's technically
Yep.
illegal. So that's an
Absolutely. Cannabis was the same before legalization. There was a period, sort of 2015 to 18, where stores are popping up all over the place. Quasi medical, quasi not, unlicensed, getting shut down. But it's kind of like once the horses left the barn, it couldn't get put back in a little bit. So what tends to happen here in Toronto, they might get shut down, they'll get fined, but their receipts from the week were more than the fines, so they're still happy they made money and they just open up again next week. Keep going. Yeah.
Well, you're raising for me an interesting point around the intersection of capitalism or capitalistic society and medicine and psychedelics and something like mushrooms, which, on a personal level, I hold psychedelic mushrooms to be very sacred, actually. That's how I look at them, how I approach them. And I've talked to a number of people who the thought of going to a store that's next to the liquor store, that's next to the grocery store, that anyone can walk in and buy psilocybin, on the one hand, great, they're
Yeah.
legal, let's make the access. But on the other hand, a sense of honoring the sacredness and a resistance to having them just be another thing that you buy with money, even though I get that's how we're organized as a society. I think there's
Yeah.
something to be said for having some kind of, I don't know what the answer here is. I'm just voicing this feeling that I have
Yeah.
around it.
I I have concerns around it for similar but different reasons. I haven't studied, with in sort of the indigenous roots or rituals associated with psilocybin or ayahuasca or anything else, right? I think I've come at it from a very different perspective. Like my personal journey into psychedelics was very late. right? Like I actually didn't even do shrooms in high school. I was pretty straight laced. I was a kid who was hitting the bar and stuff like that. And very trepidatious. Like, I mean, just, I'd hear hallucination. I'd be like, oh, I don't know. It's not for me. I don't know what's going to do to me. It was only much later on, and it was really just a result of starting to understand what was going on in this ecosystem and talking to people one after another, like dozens and dozens of them, through the work that we were doing, whose transformation stories were just so consistent over and over and over again. You do just kind of get drawn in. You're just like, okay, I'll be fine. And I think it's really something that's worthwhile to try out. And actually, in my personal life, I'm just going through a separation, and so marriage is ending, so I'm at that
Mm.
life stage. And there was a period in time where we actually tested out MDMA therapy to see if it would actually work. And I mean, once you've tried it, it's impossible to negate the impact, right? You can
Mm.
see what it's doing. You can understand why it's having the impact that it is. You're having this shared experience, and it's incredibly powerful.
It's amazing.
So it's like the thing that concerns me more than anything is the self-dosing, kind of context here, where hey, like I'm interested in ketamine. Hey, I'm interested in doing a psilocybin journey with somebody and properly integrating it. Why is it so expensive? Why do I have to pay three, four, $5,000 for these treatments when I can go and buy my own psilocybin supply in the gray market and self-dose, and maybe I'll just end up in the same place? That's the part of it which actually really concerns me, and why, cannabis store is totally different. Like anyone who sort of equates the two together, I think is really missing the point. One, palliative, but the other therapeutic and powerful. And for me, it is a little bit less the spiritual element, more about making sure that people who need it for therapeutic purposes are doing it the right way and with good intention and with good practitioners around them to not necessarily keep them safe, although it's part of it, but also to make sure they optimize the experience for them.
Yeah, you're raising a number of good points. The cost is a factor. And I think, personally, I'm proud to be able to offer psychedelic therapy to people at a much more affordable rate. Offer a lot of people discounts, sliding scales. There are ways
That's
that I've been
great.
able to work with insurance. Obviously, insurance isn't covering psychedelic therapy itself, but insurance can cover, if you're working with me as your therapist, the integration, the preparation, the psychoeducation, because all those pieces, the focus is actually on your personal growth, journey, integration, healing, and being the best person you can be in the world. It's not
Yeah.
focused on a particular substance, right? The substances, and we could talk about it, different ways we could look at it, but it could be a vehicle for transformation. It can be a medicine. It can be provide the context, and then the longer term project, which I think I'm just like such a believer in the importance of what's called integration as a long term process for living the insights that you have, living those transformations, living those changes, like showing up in a different way, so it's not just like a vacation or a
Right.
cool experience you had. It's actually like, how are we going to
You've
shift?
committed to it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that's right. And we know that I don't know how much, sort of data and science support that, but we know, talking to practitioners and talking to people who've gone through a, full sort of transformation and a reset experience, and they've done it with proper integration and with, the right facilitators around. I mean, we know that it matters, right? We know that it does make a difference. And I think the problem is it's such a complicated thing to tell the average person, here's why and here's what it gives you. And even within the community, it's not like everything's black and white, right? It's not like everything is so crystal clear. We've all got questions, and no one necessarily knows definitive answers to anything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's it. That's a really good point too. We're on the frontier of something new. We're figuring things out. Everyone's very different. Everyone's unique.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious if you want to share with us your experience with MDMA therapy, what that was like, what you noticed, and had you taken MDMA in the past in a more social or recreational setting, or was it your first time?
No, first timer, yeah. Yeah, I mean, we did it as a couple, to sort of
Oh,
start things off without proper therapy as attached to it. And it was more sort of, I mean, recreational, but also therapeutic at that point. The experience as I've retold it is kind of like if you've been in a long-term relationship before, and I mean like 10 years plus, and the accumulated shit in a relationship that is almost inevitable. bless anybody who doesn't have that after 10 years, but most of us do. All that stuff that like you did 8 years ago that people still remember and they won't let you forget. It's just sort of stuck there, right? It just
Yeah.
and it gets layered on top of it. But
Yeah.
those roots, those sort of traumatic roots between the couple, that just don't ever get exercised out and are buried there. It's like they're gone for 6 hours, and you're looking at each other like it's the honeymoon phase all over again, and you kind of recapture how that felt for the first time in, I mean, some in our case, decades, right? I mean, it was probably 15 years since that that feeling was there, and it was just so powerful because it's, unfortunately, if you don't properly integrate it, and I'm not sure that we did, the what came back from the other side of that partnership was, well, I think this was just the drugs talking, so I don't think it mattered. And I'm like, I think that was a failing in the integration for us because I think that it didn't create the feeling, it allowed you to remember what it was. And I thought that was incredibly
Yeah.
powerful.
So you did MDMA therapy with a therapist with your wife, where you and your wife both took it together with a therapist?
Oh, in an abbreviated form, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did
And
you
I
sort of
think
share?
we didn't do enough of it.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, it's great to hear, and I think it's just helpful for people to hear this little story and example. If you could just share with us some of the just logistics, because I just imagine someone listening to this is like, what did that look like? Were you seeing that therapist beforehand and had a relationship, or was this your only experience with them? What was the follow?
Yeah.
How long was it? Did it last? Yeah.
It was kind of abbreviated, and the considering, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you the story because we're putting on the Open Minds Expo, and I'm a big proponent of what's going on here, and yet it's almost like taking the advice for yourself, as you're the last person to take your own good advice. And so we didn't do it properly. We didn't have a relationship ahead of time. We actually did the journey and then very quickly sought somebody to, at my urging, to make sure that we got that part of it, but we didn't do it appropriately, and then we kind of ran out of time at the end, so it was already kind of too late. So in hindsight, as I've kind of reflected back on that effort, which at that point was kind of a last ditch kind of effort, what was it, the profound experience and why it became clear to me that, I've obviously been kind of open to the transformational power here. And so I was very interested in doing the integration. And I think if you haven't kind of flipped that switch in your mind yet, where somebody just becomes interested in believing that there's some power in this,
Yeah.
you're still resistant to it. And if you're resistant to it, it's not going to work. You have to allow yourself the space to believe that it can, and then really kind of have the experience.
It's a good point, and I agree in general. And that I've seen that kind of dynamic happen with couples around some of this and around other things too. And you could say it's interesting just to note almost everything you're saying. You could just say about therapy in general. Like, say a couple goes to couples therapy, maybe they're there for 4 or 5 sessions. One of them could say, "Wow, this is really that was a deep insight. I really appreciated what you said there. We can make this change." And the other
Yeah.
person could have kind of already made up their mind in some level, or they just kind of or the rejection of it, or this isn't right for me. And
Right.
so it takes two people to dance, and it it takes two people to work on stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And when they do, if everybody comes in with an open mind that even if they believe change is unlikely but still possible,
Right.
it can be incredibly powerful. That I've witnessed firsthand, and every transformation story that you hear about from all walks of life and from different substances and different mental health conditions is that's the uniform, consistent kind of takeaway for me. It's just it doesn't really matter. There's so many different ways to find healing here within this ecosystem. And then it just becomes a question of what and with who.
Yeah. Yeah. I really hold the perspective, whether you stay with your partner or not, the growth and the effort you put in can help you for the rest of your life and help future partners or help you in the future. So it's really never wasted. It's an investment. And again, you're
I
pointing
agree.
to the power of our own consciousness, our own minds, our own beliefs of how the story that we're telling. And that's a big part of the integration process. What story are you living, and how does this make sense in that story? And part of
Yeah.
where people get in the difficult psychedelic experiences or things that feel destructive or negative can be because the story, the belief, the understanding isn't congruent. It's not lining up with who they think they are, and it's not, so it's just I'm just fascinated by that. The kind of I think this is especially true for people in our culture that we need to have a conceptual understanding, and that's actually
Mhm.
a process that we can participate in and realize that we're creating. We're creating this on some level and
Mm.
engage with that. And yeah,
Yeah, very true. Very true. So, I mean, I think it's great, in my kind of long career in, outside of cannabis and psychedelics and before that, this really is the first time where I can look myself in the mirror and say, you're not just building something, for business and commerce, but if we're successful and, all these people come out and they learn about how to engage, and it makes them more likely to do that. I can honestly say to myself that I've been helping people along the way, and it's just an amazing,
yeah,
you in your career you get that experience almost like every day, right? But when you come from my background, you don't, right? And so
mm,
and it's just this really interesting dynamic that I've never really had the pleasure of before, and it just enhances the whole thing, right? I mean, it just makes your work just becomes a passion and not just a job.
yeah, I love that. It's so important. You're serving, you're helping, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's meaningful. Well, I'd love to hear more of your personal story of how you got to where you're at and how you came to care and be passionate about this.
Yeah, for sure. So our background, my partner Josh and I, we started working together in cannabis, in sort of the heyday of legalization here in Canada, recreational legalization. So we were running really big consumer shows up here called the Lift and Co shows, for cannabis, and we worked with everybody from a recreational perspective. And the idea was just consumers were interested; they were looking at cannabis in the way they'd look at alcohol, right? It's just this consumer packaged good vice category. Hey, let's go and figure out what brands we want to buy. So we were a marketing agency effectively for the
Okay.
industry. And
And you,
COVID. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
so just you were creating like large in-person events where different companies, organizations could present and people could come and some that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Beautiful. Yeah.
Very similar to the Open Minds Expo, bigger, 20,000 people over a weekend taking over like the Denver Convention or the
Wow.
Colorado Convention Center downtown. It was kind of like that scale, like a MAPS scale show, for the consumer. And they would come and learn about brands and get their t-shirts and, learn what they'd want to buy ultimately when we went legal. So that was how we all sort of got to know each other originally. COVID came along and killed the business. Obviously, we weren't running live shows and there wasn't much we could do in 2020 and 2021. So that business died and everybody got let go, myself included. And my partner Josh and I spent early 2020 kind of thinking, what do we want to do next? And we had become aware of psychedelics. We'd actually had some content in our last Lift and Co show in very early 2020 about psychedelic therapy and the revolution coming in, and it was from an investment perspective. And so we were kind of curious about it, but as I said, I didn't know very much about it, and I wasn't a psychonaut or anything like that. That came later. We really started to try to figure out, as consumer oriented people, what's the problem that needs to get solved here? Who are we helping? What do we need to do to bring some sunlight here and to allow people to access this world? And we started a website. So it's called Fresh Minds. It's FRSH minds.com. There's no E, vowels cost extra. Fresh Minds is a trip booking service for psychedelic retreats. We've got 150 partners. They're in countries all over the world. And if you're interested in going, we try to help sort of sculpt your decision. Where do you want to go, and who do you want to work with? What medicines do you want to work with? What protocols? Difficult job because you really don't know who's a great operator and who isn't until stories come out afterwards. So that's a whole separate problem. Fresh Minds was really a great way for us to learn because we got to meet practitioners running retreats all over the world. And I, got to travel to a lot of those places, meet them in person and go and check out the retreats and take pictures and interview them. And what was really interesting about that experience was that everybody had a really common um, problem. And the problem was it's hard to find me in the world, right? Because there's lots and lots of retreats, and I'm a 5 hour drive away from the airport in San Jose, Costa Rica, and I'm up in a mountain lodge, and people just they don't know me, right? So it's word of mouth. And when they find me, I've got this great website which is just full of information about my, studying with the Shipibo and all the different modalities that I introduce. And the fact is, people don't read that stuff because they're on a website for 60 seconds on average. They just don't have attention span anymore. And in that time, they need to learn about me. They need to learn about the molecules that I work with. They need to learn about the other modalities that I introduce within my protocol. They need to understand what the accommodations are going to be like and why it's so expensive and how do I get there from the airport. No, 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 no. And it's too much, right? They check out. They don't even submit anything to me because I already lost them, right? They just don't, they didn't have the time or patience to really decipher this and then to decide across all the other hundreds of retreat options that exist. I mean, in Costa Rica alone, there's probably several hundred of them. Where do I go? Which one do I want to work with? And you know what we realized? To answer these questions, there was really only one way people were doing it. They'd get the practitioner on a call, on an intake call, and they'd start asking them all their questions. I'm sure they do it to you too, because it's not just retreats, it's everybody,
Yeah.
everywhere. This is how people learn because the truth is it's super complicated. They'll never really sort of understand this. And it's so individualized in terms of your tolerance, your background, what you're trying to accomplish, who you're working with, that unless you have this kind of conversation with somebody, you're just kind of lost. You don't get it.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of the moment where we were like, there's so many websites around. Everybody's got one, and they're so full of great information. Everybody's got the same information. You know what? People don't read it, and
Hmm.
it just isn't how people can get educated here. They need to meet the practitioners, and that was the idea for the show. It was like, let's just build that environment, that safe container where that conversation can take place.
Oh, I see. That's beautiful. I think you're right
Thank you.
about that in-person conversation, how important that is. And it's hard to take in. We're in the I talk about this a lot on the podcast. We're in this age of information, and we're all dealing with information overwhelm and overload.
Mm.
And there's a kind of war, so to speak,
Yeah.
for attention. And we're getting
Oh,
bombarded all the
yeah.
time. And I can't tell you
And
how
it
many.
just keeps getting worse.
Yeah, it keeps getting worse. It just happened to me. I just noticed it yesterday. Like I'm using Instagram to some degree professionally. It's an extremely addictive, social media platform, obviously. But how many times I've been like, okay, I need to message this person on Instagram or make this post on Instagram, pick up my phone, open up Instagram, and then I'm like lost. And then I can't even remember why I opened up the app. And then I like put the phone down. I'm like, okay, oh, that's what it was. I have to do it again.
I'll be
So,
honest,
so
I'm a,
fast.
I'm a I'm a media person, for my career pretty much throughout, and I hate social media. I'm barely on it personally at all, like nothing, not even just to consume it. I think it's incredible time suck. I think people are very angry. I think it's led to a lot of the cultural and societal ills
Yeah.
that we're seeing in countries all over the world, right? I think it's really sort of driving a lot of negativity, and so I'm personally not that subscribed to it, but for the expo, you know that you've got to be in front of people where they are because you want people to find out about it. It's only a show only matters if the community gets behind it and wants to participate. So we're all over Instagram and
Yeah.
lots of other channels and testing TikTok. And for me, it's a little bit like you're trying to do something that's really important for the community, and then you end up making silly TikTok videos and stuff, and it's just like it's dissonant, like
Yeah.
it should be much more sincere than that, but that's just how people find out about stuff, so you kind of have to, right?
Yeah. Kind of, it's like a big game that can get sucked into. I mean, there are positives to it. And I think psychedelic renaissance, whatever word we want to label it, psychedelic movement has grown a lot through social media, of course. So,
That is true.
yeah,
That is true. It's a double-edged sword for me. I tend to with social media, I tend to see the negative side of that double-edged sword more than the positive. But you're right. I mean, it also has that incredible power to get stories that might otherwise not really emerge in the
mm,
headlines out.
yeah, yep, that's true. Yeah, for better or worse.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
Yeah, I think part of what you're pointing to, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, there are hundreds, there are thousands of people offering retreats using psychedelics now, different therapy options, coaches, facilitators. There's more indigenous groups, which is wonderful, doing more traditional things. There, other people taking bits and pieces from different traditions, or maybe they're trauma informed in some sense, or maybe they were in the personal coaching world and now they're um, teaching people about microdosing. And it's just a big thing, and it's evolving, and it does take quite a bit of education. So I think conferences like what you're organizing are really helpful. It's a chance to take in a lot of information in a way that's actually coming in, face to face, person to person, and getting that lay of the land. And it's an interesting thing with psychedelics. If you're using them for growth, for healing, for transformation, you need to have it's just you need to have a kind of understanding, a kind of map, and you can have an
Mhm.
experience, and then you can make sense of it and integrate it. Just trying to put that in like a really brief nutshell, right? And if you can imagine like in the 1950s and 1960s, the CIA, this is like, dark history, was doing experiments where they were giving people large doses of LSD. And
Sure.
no one in our society knew about LSD really. No one knew what it was. No one had any idea about it. And then you're giving a large dose to someone who has no context, no understanding. And some of those experiments, the people did not realize, they were not told that they've been given a substance, been given to
Yeah.
them surreptitiously. And you could imagine the havoc that can wreak, the trauma. And
Oh yeah.
so part of in advocating for psychedelic therapy, we also need to be aware of psychedelic trauma. That it can be
Mm.
traumatic experiences that are overwhelming, confusing, they don't make sense, they don't fit into our life narrative. And
Hmm.
so there's a danger that anything that is powerful could be used for good or ill, I believe, like a car. A car has a lot of
Yeah,
power. It can drive us a plane, it can fly us across the world. We didn't used to be able to do that. It can also be used to fly into the Twin Towers, and blow up a building.
that's true.
So we gotta really respect and appreciate the power here that we're talking about. I believe.
Yeah, I think that's that, earlier we were talking about storefronts in Toronto and just, recreational sort of, um, um, availability of psychedelics. And I mean, right now, if I chose to order pretty much anything that you could think of to my front door with free shipping from within Canada illegally, but there's so much accessibility now on the recreational side for so many of these things, and I think that's the part that really makes me uncomfortable with the storefronts. It's just it's you think spirituality, and I kind of think like safe, not safety, but the right reverence for the power of the medicines and not sort of taking them um for granted, for
Yeah.
lack of a better
Yeah.
term, you know?
Especially with younger people, especially with teenagers, people who their brain hasn't finished developing, and they're gonna have
Yeah.
a lot more impulsivity and obviously risk taking, and that's part of being a teenager. And it can be fun, it can be good. We all go through that life journey, but I am concerned about that. And being here in Boulder, Colorado, I see that
Mm.
sometimes. The increase in accessibility and availability can have those effects too. And I'm concerned about a backlash against it, which is
Yeah.
what we've experienced in the past.
Yeah, I think there's always that risk, right? And those storefronts can become lightning rods for that conversation too, right? Because when I go around in Toronto and talk to people about what I'm doing, one of two responses, right? It's well, one of three. Either number one, oh, so you just told me you're a drug dealer. I don't like you anymore. I get that sometimes. Number two, wow, that's fascinating. Like I would love to participate. What a great idea. I've always been interested. Or number three, oh, are you like running the stores? And I think that that's the problem is that you know that has become the face of the psychedelic movement in a city like Toronto. It's the thing that people associate because they drive by them and they see them every day, right? It's very visible and in your face. And I think that you're right. The concern for me is that going to become a point of contention? Are there going to be lots of people for whom this is already a source of stigma saying, whoa, time out. Like you're selling drugs on the street illegally and no one's doing anything about it. Time out. Everybody hold up. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big concern because I think that the amount of damage that can be done
Yeah.
by sort of taking a step back legislatively because the voter is now saying, well, this is right up in my back. But look what happened in Oregon, right? Where the eastern half of the state wanted to secede based on the
Yeah.
legalization legislation that came through, right? I mean, that's the kind of response that you don't want to have because there's so much healing that could happen here if we do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. These are really good issues. I think it's really good to put it out there and have people reflect on them. It's not hard to imagine something tragic happening to someone, the media taking that story and it getting in everyone's mind, and then a politician running on a tough on crime kind of agenda, or kind of stigmatizing it, and kind of and the whole pendulum swinging back the other way.
Yeah.
Historically,
Uh,
that's happened all the time, and so it's wouldn't be we shouldn't be surprised if some version of that happens again. I don't know if we
that's right.
want to go into it, but recently there was the big media story with Matthew Perry,
I
who had
yeah,
been, yeah.
I was gonna bring that up, and I'm Canadian, so trust me, I get asked about it all the time. He was one of our great exports.
Oh,
It was really sad, and I think that I keep getting asked about that when I'm, talking to folks like you, right? It comes up in the conversation a lot. And what I keep saying is, yeah, that's exactly why we're doing what we're doing. Now, in his case, he was working with practitioners, but it does, I don't know the facts of the case, so I'll reserve judgment a little bit, but it did sound on the surface of it a little bit of a Michael Jackson kind of, okay, whatever you want, we'll get it for you. So maybe the ethical kind of perspective was lacking there. But I think if you're working with somebody who's a well-intentioned practitioner, you can potentially avoid exactly what happened. And that's, if ketamine is the way that you decide to sort of move into this world, you can't be taking these things for granted.
Yeah, we can't take him for granted, and it's a tragic story with Matthew Perry. It's worth noting, as I understand the details of the case, I'm an expert, but that he died of drowning. And
Yeah.
obviously, anytime you take in a mind-altering substance, set and setting, being in a safe place, not being in water is probably
Right.
a good idea.
Right.
And
Right.
so it's clearly, he was working with doctors and maybe therapists, but at that moment when he drowned, he wasn't in the presence of a therapist. I just think it's worth saying that. And so he was
Yeah.
taking that substance outside of that context. And so it's good to note that, and yeah.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think it's so hard, right, for the average person to get all of this nuance that we're talking about. Like, look at us, like we're talking about this for a half an hour, 40 minutes, and you get into the nuance of what's really important here. The average person, if it's not in the headline, they've already forgotten about it, right? So getting that message out it's really important. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up that point about our shortened attention span, the information overload, the average person just seeing the headline here, there. And what I love about podcasts and why I'm doing it in part is I love the long form conversation. We
Yeah.
can get into the weeds, we can get into details, and they matter. And
Yeah.
newsflash, pretty much every, living, breathing human being can have an extended attention span. It's just that our modern society has kind of attacked it and made it harder, but most people could watch a 2 hour long movie if it's a movie they like, and their attention will be with that movie until the end, and they'll understand what happened, and they might pick up on details, they might analyze it afterwards. And the popularity of podcasts speaks to that too. And it's the mainstream news media has been a big part of this problem with, like, for example, in the
Mm.
presidential debate with Harris and Trump, it's like I think they had 2 minutes to answer a question and a minute to respond, something like that. And it's just absurd. And it's like,
Mm.
hey, we're all
Yeah.
here. Why not let this candidate for the presidency speak on this topic for 5, 8, 10 minutes? Like, let's take up some time. Let's go into it. Like we're
You
not.
already know you already know the answer why they won't, right? It's people won't pay attention for that long, and they just can't absorb it very easily in
I
that way,
think
right?
I think people have a hunger for more information. I think we're selling ourselves short a little bit. It's like it's a little bit like
I
junk
hope
food.
so.
Like, yeah, McDonald's is popular, but hey, Whole Foods and the farmers market is filled with people. Like sit down
Yeah.
restaurants are popular too, and people can appreciate that. So it's like, yeah.
I think some people, yes, and I think other people, for a variety of reasons, they just, they don't care as much, right? I think it's hard to maintain that discourse when you're not really listening.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And as a Canadian, like I'm not getting involved. Yeah.
I think this is such,
We tend not to bring it up, but
yeah.
yeah, I think it's for every person you find who does want to get into the nuance of policy discussion, stuff like that, there's probably five more who are just like, yeah, sorry, you lost me.
Yeah. Well, let me I think this is actually a really important point we're talking about, our attention span and our lifestyle and social media and the media. I think
Mm.
part of the value and appeal of psychedelic experiences, psychedelic ceremonies for people is forcing ourselves to slow down, and the part of the
Yeah.
psychedelic effect is actually becoming more present centered and noticing what we're noticing. And I remember when I think it was like, I was like 18, and it was the first time I took a psychedelic. I believe it was LSD, and it was a life changing experience. But I remember being awestruck at a lawn and looking at the grass and noticing
Mm.
each blade of grass and noticing the dew and the water and the reflection of the moon and the way the grass was slowly moving, and it wasn't static and it wasn't still, and it was like you could see it breathing and living. And then
Mm.
I remember a few days later going back and like pausing and like looking at some graphs, and like I could start to notice those same things when I was sober, when I wasn't under that influence. And it was like, how much of
Hmm.
that experience was just noticing what's already here and like slowing down? Like that's what we need.
Yeah.
If we need to take a substance to do that because we can't make ourselves meditate, then okay. But like I think that's part of what's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, for me, while my psychedelic renaissance is fairly recent, that kind of understanding is also fairly recent. And I've kind of wondered in my own mind, chicken and egg, did one precipitate the other? Or was it just sort of coincidental that maybe I was just open to more things? But just the concept of mindfulness
Yeah.
and how to bring that discipline into your life where it didn't exist before. And I never got diagnosed when I was a kid. My partner Josh, we were on a flight back from Miami one day, and he's really frustrated that I'm always forgetting stuff that he tells me. And he's like, Did anyone ever tell you you've got ADHD?" And I was like, "No, but now that you say it, it's pretty interesting diagnosis." And
Uh-huh.
the concept of mindfulness for somebody with that kind of brain is a really challenging one, and one that I've been wrestling to absorb into my life for several years now. And it's when you do it, it's so transformative, right? I mean, it really, you talk about sort of looking at the individual blades of grass. Just being able to sit and have a conversation with somebody without already thinking about the five things that are, the next things that I've got to worry about. It's been such a transformation for me personally, and it's very much an ongoing one. Those things are really powerful, and I think you're right. It's I don't know whether it was chicken and egg, one precipitated the other, but they're both important. They've both been
Yeah.
helpful.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, I think they go together. I'm glad in your case they are. Um, and they should. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you want to share with us like some of the impact changes you've seen in your life through engaging with psychedelics in a mindful way?
Yeah, I think, certainly, experimenting with psilocybin and a little bit of LSD as well. And I think it's very nuanced for me. I think that, it's definitely been, as I've been talking about, kind of going through a personal, period of my life, which was unpleasant. It's definitely helped bring some context around that, and to internalize it and to say, okay, you know what, like there's an emotional and grieving kind of element of it, but there's also a very rational, let's figure out what went wrong, how much of it was my fault, and how do I observe that in real time and make sure that that doesn't happen again, right? I think anybody who's going through what I'm going through would you can only hope that you won't repeat your mistakes in the next go around if you're fortunate enough to get one. So
Yeah.
I think there it's been very helpful for me, and just sort of framing up like, okay, you know what, this was me. I can absolutely see that objectively in relief. And now with that mindfulness in place, you know, catching yourself in real time making the same mistakes and stopping them and actually talking about them openly with somebody, like, this was my natural instinct and I actually just stopped myself because I know that the response would be this. And it's just
Nice.
opens up an incredible dialogue with somebody that's at another level from what you're used to.
Yeah, that's great. That's a good example. And like that ability to slow down and not be
Yeah.
autopilot, not be so reactive, to notice things, to drop in deeper. That's great.
Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for this Open Minds Expo. I know I'm going to be talking there on integration, which I'm super excited
You
about.
are. Yeah, I'm super. And after this conversation, I think really excited to have you up there. I'll probably be moderating that panel, so we'll
Hey,
be we'll be
nice.
talking again in 2 weeks.
Looking forward to it. Well,
Yeah, us too.
any last thoughts, words for us? Anything else you want to share?
Hey, listen, this has been great. Thank you very much for taking the time to kind of get this all out. I think what we're doing is really important. I think that the community, and not just in Colorado, but here in Toronto and elsewhere where we want to take the show, the expo is only going to be successful and bring a lot of value and healing to the community if the community gets behind it. So, like, if you're in the space or you know people who are interested in psychedelic therapy, either as a practitioner or consumer, come out and support the show. I think it's if we're not getting this message out to this community, it's actually just kind of holding everybody back, right? You let fewer clients, less healing, more
Hmm.
trauma, right? Like the
Yeah,
wider we can spread that message, the better for everybody.
absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate how your story and where you're coming from. It's like, yeah, maybe connected more with like just the average experience of a lot of people. Like I feel like a lot of people can relate to you, and um, it's possible. I'm just kind of reflecting right now in this moment with you. there can be a little bit of like an ivory tower effect of like in the world of
Hmm.
meditation and mindfulness and therapy and healing, and psychedelics can go into that too. And if
Oh
everyone
yeah.
seeing and talking is in this kind of world, and it can lose sight of the fact that like, yeah, like maybe the average guy, the factory worker, the Amazon worker, the person who's just been a businessman, like they're not, that's not been their world. And like, we don't want to, we don't want to turn people off by being too insular or too technical or too highbrow about it. We want to make this accessible to everyone. That's the promise of this as a movement, that it's an option.
Yeah.
It's not going to be recommended to everyone, but for some people who feel called to it, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have some trauma, you have something in your life that isn't working, a relationship that isn't quite working. Here's a tool, here's an option. Yeah.
Yeah. Julian, you said it exactly right, man. Like, I think that ego is human, and as much as we talk about ego death, I mean, there are plenty of very large egos in this space, and as you know, and they blanket my LinkedIn feed all the time,
Huh.
and it's not to say, that's also a bit of two minds, right? I mean, the fact that you can bring a lot of attention to what you're talking about is really important, right? We should all be really happy that those people are out there advocating for the sector, because it's really, they're doing a lot of really good work there, but it's also, to your point, it makes it feel a little insular, it makes it feel a little ivory tower, and that's not how you get the community to really
Yeah.
participate and have the average person come in and say, yeah, you know what, I am stuck and this actually might help me. It actually turns people off.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad we're naming that. That feels really important too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. This is a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Those are great. Thank you very much, and looking forward to meeting you in person in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.